I think it's quite commonplace now for lots of dealers to do unaccompanied test drives. And actually, I know Autotrader did some, again, when we were off air talking with Tanisha, they were talking about the kind of study that Autotrader did in terms of car buyers and what, in general, what they like about buying cars, what they don't like about buying cars. And I think from memory, they had 5 or 6 points of what people didn't like. And one of the kind of pain points was the test drive with somebody they didn't know. They felt awkward. They felt like they were being judged.
Yep.
And that's been taken out of it automatically now with unaccompanied test drives. And I think I remember watching a webinar, and Robert Forrester was on there, and he was saying that he would never have thought unaccompanied test drives would have worked. And actually now, the conversions are pretty much the same, and actually it speeds up the process. And again, some of our clients, that's what they've seen, is instead of now the sales exec goes out with the customer, spends the time on the test drive, then comes back and starts doing some of the paperwork. They can get some of that stuff done now whilst the customer's out test driving the car by themselves. They feel happier test driving the cars. It doesn't affect the conversion rates, and it makes it a bit quicker.
Hi guys, welcome back to the Armchair Show. My name is Mark Ellis, and today I was joined by John Miele, who is the Managing Director of Roadster, and we had a really interesting chat about the car buyer journey. You don't want to miss this one. John, we were just talking off camera about the buying process, and I bought my most recent car as a second-hand car recently, and I was surprised because when I got to the dealership, I was all ready for the guy to come out with me and do the test drive as normal, but he gave me the keys and said, "You've got it for an hour. Off you go." And I thought, fantastic. Quite an expensive car as well. It wasn't, they give me the keys to something which they clearly wouldn't want me to crash into a tree, which I didn't, thankfully. But that surprised me. But from the sounds of it, that's quite common now, isn't it?
Yeah, I think that's definitely something that the pandemic has kind of a good thing that it's brought. Let's say. Is that I think it's quite commonplace now for lots of dealers to do unaccompanied test drives. And actually, I know Autotrader did some, again, when we were off air talking with Tanisha, they were talking about the kind of study that Autotrader did in terms of car buyers and what, in general, what they like about buying cars, what they don't like about buying cars. And I think from memory, they had 5 or 6 points of what people didn't like. And one of the kind of pain points was the test drive with somebody they didn't know. They felt awkward. They felt like they were being judged.
Yep.
And that's been taken out of it automatically now with unaccompanied test drives. And I think I remember watching a webinar, and Robert Forrester was on there, and he was saying that he would never have thought unaccompanied test drives would have worked. And actually now, the conversions are pretty much the same, and actually it speeds up the process. And again, some of our clients, that's what they've seen, is instead of now the sales exec goes out with the customer, spends the time on the test drive, then comes back and starts doing some of the paperwork. They can get some of that stuff done now whilst the customer's out test driving the car by themselves. They feel happier test driving the cars. It doesn't affect the conversion rates, and it makes it a bit quicker. And I think that's quite nice. Funnily enough, when previously in my last company where we had some dealers working with us in Germany, and actually unaccompanied test drives pre-pandemic was the norm in Germany. That's how every car was sold. It was like, here's the keys, you go off and try the car. But over here, that was kind of, it was very kind of, I think dealers were quite apprehensive over trying that. But again, the hand were kind of forced with the pandemic, and actually it's I think it's helped with the process. But overall, when we were talking off air, we were talking about how long it can take to buy a car. And when we did this time case study with some of our partners before they rolled out the technology that they're using now, it was even with that increase in speed by having the unaccompanied test drives, on average it was still 2.5 hours in the dealership going through buying a car, and that's still a pain point for a lot of customers.
It's a long time, isn't it? I think
it is.
Also what you've just explained, the way that it speeds up the process, giving you the keys and letting you go out on your own, it happens without you thinking as a consumer. Because now thinking back to the process I went through a few months ago, I got back and lo and behold, he was sat there with all the paperwork and he was ready to go, basically.
Absolutely.
And I suppose, again, with hindsight, I bought it much quicker than I would do normally. Because 2 hours in a dealership's a long time, isn't it?
It is, yeah. I mean, it's an exciting thing. When you're buying a new car, it's exciting. And the exciting part is the product, and you want to spend time with the product.
Yeah.
And so if you were doing 2 hours just like with the product, okay, fun, that's no problem. But when it's kind of doing the paperwork and waiting for deals to be stacked or whatever it might be to get to the right amount, that's the bit people don't like.
Yeah, and there's so few of the products that are like that. Houses is one thing, but you don't really call a house a product, I suppose, do you? But a car is quite. I mean, often people need cars, but my car is just a toy, really. So I don't really need the car. It was completely one of those sort of purchases for me, a kind of a toy product. And for that reason, I've never enjoyed buying cars ever. Like you say, I enjoy the process of finding the one that I want and driving it and imagining myself owning it. But it's so often spoilt by that process, isn't it?
Yeah, it can be. I mean, some people love it. Don't get me wrong.
Sure,
but yeah, a lot of the research done by various people out there would suggest that a lot of people don't like the haggling. They don't like the time spent. And yeah, again, what we're trying to achieve is how do you reduce that? How do you give not just customers their time back, but the sales execs as well and the sales managers? How do you give them their time back? And I mean, there's something we've got is very, very basic, very simple. But once you see it, you think, God, why hasn't it been like that for years? But literally, like a matrix, a grid of if you're doing, you select the amount of miles you want to do per year. If you're buying a car on finance, this is on PCP as an example, and you just say, okay, right, I'm doing 12,000 miles a year or 10,000 miles a year, and it just shows you what is the monthly cost based on 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, or 36 months, etc., whatever it might be. And how does that vary based on the deposit that you were thinking about putting in, and then £1,000 less? What does that do to the payments across those terms? And £1,000 more. So if you've got like 3 years and you've got £1,000 more and less, you've got basically a grid of 9 payments, and it shows you exactly what it is. And if you want to achieve a target payment, you can type that in, and it will update it to instantly show you, here's the deposit you need to do to get that per month across 2, 3 or 4 years. Or if you've got a target deposit and say I can't do more than say £5,000, it updates, well, that's what it means to monthly payments. And something like that, it just cuts through all of the kind of mess. Exactly. And from a sales exec's point of view, it stops them having to run back and forth to a sales manager to say, oh, they've asked what happens if I put in £1,000 more. They've asked what about the demo we've got, what would that be? They can just do it instantly. Click
that exact same thing happened to me. The guy had to keep going backwards and forwards, and it didn't happen just in the dealership. It happened during that day. But once I'd gone home and thought about it a bit and thought, well, actually, I can put a bit more money in or whatever. It was like an email chain that kept going backwards and forwards, phone calls constantly, and that the process probably took 3 or 4 days to buy that car. And I would have probably bought it on site, really, looking back, or maybe a day afterwards after sleeping on it.
I also think that whole process doesn't give you as a consumer much trust in the price, because it's, well, I asked a question, you came back and you gave me a different price, etc. Whereas when you see it on a screen, people trust what they see on screens. It's like buying a mobile phone. Yeah. You can try and call them up and negotiate. It doesn't really work that well. You can change different terms. If I want more data, it costs this much. Yeah. If I want less data, it's this much. It's the same kind of thing. You can adjust the 3 different terms that you can adjust in terms of how long you take the finance for, what deposit you put in, how many miles you're doing. And then the price is the price. And it just builds more trust in the pricing, which helps, obviously the marketplace we're in now, there's not really much negotiation going on versus what there might have been a couple of years ago. But again, back in the US, the dealers who have been using this for a while now, they've seen that it makes negotiation into a much smaller parameter because they're not unrealistic with what the payment should be, is one thing. But the second thing, they trust what they see on the screen. Yeah. And I think, that's all part of speeding up the process to make it, again, better for the people selling cars to do it more quickly, so they spend less time with each customer. Not that you want to, you still got enough time, you still can spend an hour and build rapport and get to know them as a customer and do a good job. You don't want to just churn them out. No. But actually you're not then spending 2 hours, 3 hours, which means you can see more people, or you can do more prospecting with the other time. You've got more time to actually do more sales. And that's part of the efficiency, is what we're seeing is, people being able to do more sales per month because they've got more time and they're not just spending 3 hours with one customer.
I just hope we get there by the time I buy my next car. I hope it's a bit simpler by that point.
Hopefully it catches on and more of the dealers adopt this technology.
Fingers crossed. What do you think about subscriptions? We were talking again off air about this, and we won't say who it was, but someone behind the scenes here is they're basically doing the whole subscription model with their car, and it's been an interesting experience from their perspective, and it's kind of, they've rounded off thinking, I'm spending quite a lot of money here, and the benefits of being able to swap your car out every 3 or 6 months. In reality, I mean, I know nothing about this. I've only learnt this today in terms of that user experience, but it doesn't sound quite like the thing that you sold in the first place. What do you think?
I think it's still quite early days for it. That I think it will grow. It will be a growing area. I don't buy into the fact that every customer wants to keep changing their car every 3 months. I think that's a pain. It's admin that people don't need. I do think the kind of using it as a service will have its place. People will it will grow. But yeah, I'm not sold on the whole the ease of doing it. And again, it's a bit of a strange time, but a lot of cars aren't there, so all of a sudden it's can I get the car I want in the next few months or not? And if I don't, do I lose the one that I had which I liked, and now that's gone to somebody else and I can't get it back for another however long. It's I think would you ever do it? Would you ever consider doing that? What would have to change if not to tempt you into that? I think the pricing at the moment is just way off. That's the biggest thing. I think if the pricing was kind of on a par with a PCP or a lease or something like that, then yeah, most people might think at that point, well, to have the flexibility is nice. Again, whether they actually utilise that or not, I'm not sure. For me, yeah, I mean, you could end up in some cases spending an extra couple of £100 a month, and you're thinking, well, why aren't I just kind of, doing a 2-year PCP or 3-year PCP or something like that instead?
And that's so out of step, because obviously we can appreciate that manufacturers and dealerships are trying to follow the model of other subscription services, like think of Netflix, for example. But the difference is with things like Netflix, it's a very digestible monthly price, isn't it? And you don't think I'm paying £10 a month and I'm only getting this. You think I'm paying £10 a month and we get all these films and all these series and everything. It doesn't seem to be the same with cars, does it? They're lagging behind. They're having to charge a lot of money for these, and like you say, because of that, they're then £200-300 more than a PCP or lease. It just makes it. Why would you go for that? Yeah, I mean, again, it depends on people's situations, right? If you, if you want to kind of you move into a new city or something like that, or you've got a job and you need a car on the go. Maybe, but I mean, if you're thinking about a personal car, especially if you've got kids and you've got to keep changing the car seats every time you get a new car, it's just an absolute pain. You just want your own car. When I say you want your own car, again, there's different levels of, people who lease cars. It's still their car in their head, even though it's not actually their car. They don't own it, but in their head, that's my car. So I think we're already kind of down the kind of almost the subscription kind of model, but in terms of, like having it for a month when you need a car full time, I don't see people buying into this month I'm going to have, there might be snow, so I'm going to change it, and then when the summer comes I'm going to get an F-Type, and that, maybe a couple of times a year, maybe, but I think it's just I think people have enough going on in their lives to change their car every 3 months, 6 months. I totally agree. I wonder if it's the start of this idea of having cars that you don't own at all, and actually you don't have the car there on your drive at all. What you do is you have an app, a bit like an Uber, but it's a car that turns up and you drive it. And I know a lot of this depends on automation and what have you, but this is where we're heading towards. And what I found interesting, I've got a couple of family members who have no interest in cars, no interest in technology, but both of them recently have said to me, how far, I've heard about these cars that are just going to, you press a button on your phone and it just turns up.
It'll drive itself.
It drives itself. How far off are we? I think it's interesting that those people who, like I say, don't spend any time researching it or keeping an eye on that stuff, it's starting to filter into society now, isn't it? Do you think, how far off is that, do you think, that kind of thing? Well, I mean, I think the problem, again, is as it always does, it kind of comes down to logistics. It's if everybody wanted to do that, are there going to be, is everyone going to want the car at the same kind of times of the day? I know, kind of, I think we're now starting to return to work in a bit more, but even we were talking earlier about trains. Trains now, my trains, I don't know, different train lines might be different, but my trains there is no peak hours anymore. It doesn't cost more to go at what used to be considered peak time. It's flat rate because people aren't really travelling at the same times as they used to do. So if we don't go back to that, then potentially maybe there's cars do turn up at different times and people have different things. But again, like schools, the times will all be the times. So if everyone wanted to get their kids to school and they needed a car to turn up,
there wouldn't be enough cars to kind of logistically. How do you run that fleet where the downtime is 90% or something? It just doesn't. It won't stack up. So I don't know who's gonna run that. I mean, I think Uber talk about the most expensive part of their business. They're not profitable is because they've got drivers, and as soon as cars drive themselves, that's going to make them profitable. How close that is, I don't know. There was that new story this week about the manufacturers are going to have to take responsibility for crashes and they'll be liable, etc. I think getting the legal stuff sorted will help get it done quicker. That's still one of those kind of like, was a grey area. I think they're getting closer to nailing that. That's going to help. Eventually I think self-driving cars will eventually be a very good thing. I think different people, again, for me personally, I really enjoy driving cars. I enjoy doing that. But there are other times where I have to drive to get to a meeting. It's maybe an hour and a half, and I want to be doing some work as well, and that's then difficult. So if a car can just drive me there by itself, and I can crack open the laptop and go on with it, that's kind of a that would also be beneficial. I think self-driving cars will eventually be here. It's probably quite way away.
It feels a way off, doesn't it? I think at the minute.
I'd say so. Again, from a legal point of view, from a trust point of view, I think it'll be quite a way to go. There's things that make it difficult to get into the mainstream right now.
Lots of things to be ticked off before we get there. I suppose back in the real world, we've talked a lot today and in other podcasts. In fact, we always seem to come back to this topic about the buying journey. It's a really common theme on the Armchair Show. And from my perspective, it always just sounds like a bit of a mess. We've spoken about it a lot today. And I think a lot of that is because there's all this kind of hybrid approach to buying a car, and some people who just want to go the full-on in person, in dealership thing. Some people who will just pop the car into a basket online and check out. Not for me personally, but I get that people do that. How does all this get brought together, or does it need? Or is that something that doesn't need to happen? Do you think it's okay as it is at the minute, or is it a mess?
I mean that's a hard question. I think ultimately, I think it's really good that people are trying to make things come together. That it is difficult to do. Ultimately, if car subscriptions, if the pricing becomes right, then you might see people still go and buy one car, but maybe the second car is as and when we need it, because we don't need two cars every day. For some families, other families, they will do. So I can see car subscriptions growing when the price comes in line, and it would be like an Uber. It'd be like you get an app and you say, right, I need this car, etc. Because I'm doing something out of the ordinary today. I need to go and take the kids somewhere, or whatever, and we've only got one car in the household, and you're using it, so let's go and do that. I can absolutely see that happening, I think the autonomous thing is just way off. So it doesn't really play into my day-to-day thinking. In terms of car buying journey, that agency models, direct sales. Again, we said it earlier. I think some manufacturers will go that way, others won't. I think it won't be easy to do it. I think people think it's going to be easy, but again, the logistics of how do you as a manufacturer get the test drives done, or deliver to people who the ones, if it does grow and people do just want to put it in the box, how do you sort that out if you have to do a proper, not the hybrid agency, but if you properly have to own the inventory, etc., and sort all that out? I think that's still not going to be easy to do for the bigger manufacturers. The smaller ones, I think it'll be fine. Yep. I think smaller entrants or new entrants, Tesla, obviously the obvious one, who have kind of done it, and they sell direct to consumers, and I think they're growing quite nicely. They're doing it well. I think new entrants can do that. I think it's harder for the existing players. That's going to be tough. They've already got market share. They don't want to lose that.
Have you got any advice? I mean, obviously, a lot of these guys listen to this show. Have you got any advice for those the non-Teslas who are perhaps looking at Tesla and thinking, how can we grab a bit of that?
Yeah, I mean, again, the manufacturer-owned retail groups never seem to do the best in terms of profitability. I think maybe it's potentially a bit unfair as well, because they've got things like they're often kind of got big city centres, so maybe the overheads are bigger in the first place. Also, if they've got in previous years where there's been quite a big push of stock, if the dealer network kind of reject taking on more cars, then it's kind of left to the manufacturer-owned retail groups to take them, kind of no choice. So potentially that hurts their profitability as well. But I think there's this kind of history of manufacturers not potentially covering themselves in glory when it comes to selling cars, and ultimately they'll have to work out how to market, how to keep market share. They'll have to probably start playing with other players that they've not thought about playing with before in order to do that. It's not impossible. It's not impossible. But also I think that I'm trying to work out the real reason of them doing it. One is about price, and not having that kind of disparity for customers online to see different prices. And I think they talk about distribution costs quite a lot as well. But distribution costs have been there for a long time, and they get other kind of bits of money from the network for having a network for wholesaling the cars. And I don't think it's just easy to kind of flip it. They're trying it with kind of model lines, but then BMW tried that with their kind of like i3 and stuff, and again I think they were struggling to sell them, hence it kind of came back with margin. So I don't know, I think it's been tried a fair few times. I think the growth of online stuff makes it easier to try, and there's always that argument of, well, it didn't work 20 years ago because people didn't buy cars online. There wasn't the technology to kind of let them do that really easily, and as that grows it's easier for us to sell cars directly. Again, I think there's lots of things that they kind of don't see that happen behind the doors, and I think Dash was on talking about it the other day, all the stuff the dealers have to do, and how the manufacturer's just going to do that. I think they'll struggle.
It's unlikely, isn't it? I think in that respect. And just lastly, John, how are you going to buy your next car, do you think? Are you due a new car soon, or are you? I
am thinking about buying a car actually. I'm probably going to do it the old-fashioned way, to be honest.
Nothing wrong with that.
No, I think it's easier when you're in the industry. People, you've got contacts, so it's easier to just kind of like call somebody and say, I'm looking for something like this. And again, last time I bought a car, I trusted the person because I knew them so well. I didn't really read through all the paperwork. It sounds terrible, but it would have taken so long to have read through all the different bits of paper that you had to sign. So they kind of said to me, this is around compliance. We've sold it to you in a fair way. I was like, yeah, that's fine. Sign it. For somebody outside the industry, they wouldn't do that. They would read it. They would want to understand. So it adds time. For me, I think being in the industry it makes it easier. I wouldn't consider myself a normal car buyer in that respect, but I think I do. Being sensible about it, I would try and do more at home. I would try and do things like, if I was doing it on finance, I would do a finance application at home because I know I can do it at home. I would want all of that kind of done so that when I go to the dealership, that for me, I probably wouldn't worry about test driving it. My wife would, so we would go to the dealership. She would want to test drive it, so that's fine. So we'd do that, but I wouldn't want to have to sit there for 2 hours. 3 hours going through it all. I want to do it all kind of digitally, and then just have the fun of kind of test driving it, and then
So you kind of personally or proactively remove the friction before you get to the dealership.
Exactly.
Which again, because you know how to do that, you're part of this industry. I suppose a lot of people don't. I wouldn't think of that. I will now.
But that's the thing. Again, I think we mentioned it previously, but whenever you buy stuff, you do it the way you've always done it, and until you're introduced to a new way, and then you see it and you think, oh, that was much easier. That's how you then do it. So, for instance, right now, if people are used to just kind of, I'm going to book for a test drive, I'm going to come in, we're then going to have the negotiation after the test drive, and I'm going to do all the paperwork, and I'm going to leave. That's what they've been doing for years. Now, if kind of a new process is introduced to someone, and the dealer says, oh, by the way, you can do all this at home first if you want to, and I can guide you through that. And if they do that whilst they're at home, the next time they'll probably do it at home by themselves first, and look for the people who offer that as a service, because it is a better experience. They've enjoyed it, and so they've said, okay, well, now you've taught me how to do that, I'll just do that myself next time. So you can see how more and more online will grow, because as more people do it for the very first time and they think, well, that was easy, they're going to then do that for themselves. They'll tell friends and family, word of mouth, etc. So you can see how it will
it will filter through, won't it? I mean, that's why I love doing this show, because I learned so much about how to buy a car. So I'll definitely do that next time, and hopefully lots of people listening to this who will do the same thing. But John, we could obviously carry on talking about this for a long time. It's genuinely fascinating, but we'll definitely have you on again at some stage.
Cool.
And thank you very much for visiting. Just very quickly, what did you think the whole armchair experience in terms of the studio?
It's been really, really nice. It's really cozy. It's very welcoming. Everyone's been very very helpful and very nice. So it's been amazing.
I know you don't drink coffee, but great coffee machine as well.
Yeah, good. It looks great. I'm sure it tastes good.
Excellent. Cheers, John. Really appreciate it.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Mark. Thanks.
You've been watching The Armchair Show. Thank you so much for watching this episode. Remember to hit the subscribe button and the bell so you always get notified whenever we post a new video in the future. But until next time, we'll see you then.